Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Orko Senaroy. I work with Asian Development Bank on climate change adaptation. This is a webinar being organized under the Community Resilience Partnership Program, which is a program implemented by ADB in partnership with other institutions, primarily trying to support governments in Asia and the Pacific region, scale up investments in climate adaptation, but investments that are at the local level and that address the nexus between climate, poverty, and gender. This webinar series is called the CRPP Talks, where we essentially try to feature institutions and colleagues and experts who have been working for many years on very specific initiatives that aims to support climate adaptation solutions at the local level, but specifically solutions that have been working at scale and preferably through government systems itself. So some of you might remember a couple of months back, we organized the first CRPP talks where we had Margaret Arnold from the World Bank, who talked about the work they are doing in this context in Kenya. And today I'm very happy to have with us a colleague from UNCDF, Sophie de Koning, who is the Global Climate Facility Manager of the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, or LOCAL, of the UNCDF. And Sophie will be presenting to us some of the work they have been doing under LOCAL for almost the past 10 years or more in the region, and some of the lessons that the UNCDF has gained through implementation. For ADB colleagues who have joined today, I think this is an important topic for us because in the climate adaptation space, there is more recognition that adaptation finance needs to reach the local level where it's needed the most, which means we have to find avenues and channels to make that happen. And colleagues who work on issues around governance and decentralization can play a very, very critical role in making sure that through your programs and projects, you can enable such sort of climate finance really going to the local level. So with that, without any further delay, Sophie, thank you for joining us. And over to you, please, for a brief presentation before we open up a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Orgia, for the opportunity to be with you and with everyone to discuss this topic today. So I will try and share my screen if you just give me a second doing that. So my name is Sophie de Koning. I'm working with the UN Capital Development Fund, and I've been working for the last 9 years on local adaptation through decentralization system. So let me just try now to see if it works. I hope the bandwidth will allow. Otherwise, I might ask colleagues at ADB who also have a copy of the presentation. Let me just move to slide mode. 1 second. Sorry, it looks like the Zoom is blocking me to do that. 1 second, I'll try again. I'll take the PDF. 1 second, sorry.
And while Sophie is sharing her slides, colleagues, this is meant to be really a talk, a discussion. So please feel free to keep your videos open and participate in a discussion once the presentation is over. There's much to learn from this initiative, but also we can discuss how we can potentially collaborate and take through ADB's own program under the CRPP.
Very good. I hope it's okay in terms of seeing the slide, and if it's large enough, and perhaps with the PDF you'll see better.
It's slightly cutting off. It's large enough, but the bottom is cutting off. But we can start. I think that's okay.
Very good.
That's right. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So indeed, like Orja was saying, UNCDF, so the UN Capital Development Fund, has been working for the last 10 plus years on leveraging the channel of decentralization in a way, or making them evolve and strengthening them for the purpose of helping countries access and effectively deploy climate finance to the local level. So we've worked with all the partners here that you see, and others indirectly. Of course, all the governments, you'll see that through the presentation, but essentially it has evolved over the years into a multi-country, multi-partner initiative from the very first pilot that took place in the region in Bhutan, and we'll come to that. So now, like Orja was saying, there is an increased consensus, and it's recognized in the Paris Agreement, in the Glasgow Pact, this subnational level dimension. But when we started, and even still in practice, in real terms, in financial terms, we see that local governments remain an actor that are not fully supported to fulfill their roles. So they are, as we know, very close to the population. They're kind of a missing link in the climate finance delivery, still to deploy finance and deliver on investment in a manner that is as closely as possible responding to the needs of the population and the communities. And we can discuss how we can strengthen or incentivize improvement in that area. But we feel it's important to work with them, because that's also a way to then deliver at scale, because decentralization can provide a form of a backbone to reach really many local governments simultaneously, and therefore even more communities, villages, and so on. And they have the mandate to do so. So that's another, to do that in many countries. They have the mandate, of course, for a number of climate sensitive sectors, but also increasingly for climate change itself. In a number of legislation or climate policies, it is recognized as well at the country level, not only in the international policy documents, but they still face a funding gap. It is still the case often for development finance, but it is also the case for climate finance, which is still largely centralized, of course, accessed through central government often for this kind of solution. And therefore, we need to find avenues to help get some of that finance down using, if possible, the country systems. There is also a whole issue of accessing the climate information and then contextualizing it also to the needs of the people. So this particular initiative provides now a mechanism, effectively a global mechanism for financing local adaptation as a way to deliver on the Paris Agreement, and in-country DNDC, the NAP, and at the local level, the local development priorities, the local adaptation priorities. So, like I said, we do work on helping central government and local government access and use climate finance at the local level, very closely with the communities. To do so, we rather work on integrating climate adaptation into the local government planning and budgeting systems, but also in the intergovernmental fiscal transfer systems. And the instrument is called performance-based climate resilience grants. For those of you who come from the decentralization world, it is derived from the performance-based grants, which is a type of local development fund with performance in measures embedded. I'll explain that in the next slide. But really adjusted for the last 10 years and tested and scaled up in many countries. You'll see a map very shortly, to be meaningfully recognized by also the climate community as a climate finance instrument and as a way to deliver proven adaptation measures and expenditures. You mentioned the World Bank program. While I'll move to the next slide. In fact, the World Bank program that Margaret presented, that is operating in Kenya, is using, from a technical perspective, the same instrument, a performance-based climate resilience grant. And of course, because the World Bank has also used performance-based grant in the past. So what I explained here might largely apply to that instrument in Kenya. So we do work with central government, typically with ministries of finance, ministries in charge of local government, ministries in charge of climate change issues. We do help them access a range of finance. You've seen we try to, we typically start with global funds we might have or regional funds, in-country partners, and then also help them access green climate fund or adaptation fund. And of course, we are very much interested in the dialogue with MDBs, such as ADB, as they also perhaps consider this instrument and of course have much higher means to bring it to scale. If we move to the right part of the diagram, we do work also with countries to set up what we might call a dedicated climate window, this PBCRG, in the intergovernmental fiscal transfer system. So that window comes in addition to other grant allocation that the local governments might get. You see it's slightly smaller in size. That is to indicate that it should be, in theory, smaller in size because it's meant to cover the additional cost of climate change, not to substitute to development, not to address all the other issues that development should address. And because for climate change to be also accessed and recognized and tagged, it is important that this additionality can be also considered. Behind this blue box, there is a formula, an allocation-based formula, whereby you have a first part that is typically a basic, fairly predictable portion of the grant that might be computed based on issues like population, surface area of the local government, sometimes other indicators, depending also of what the country utilized for those other grants that reach the local government, and then a performance-based component, which then will start incentivizing change behavior in the local government, in how they interact with the communities, in how they program finance that grant, but other grants also factoring climate risks and integrating into their planning, programming, investment, and M&E, the whole cycle of their own budgeting planning cycle execution. So the local governments will access the grants as they meet certain minimum conditions, like for every performance-based grant. Typically, those are the minimum requirements that would be expected in terms of safeguards and in terms of also really meaningfully justifying that it is climate adaptation, respecting a certain list of eligible activities that speak to the mandates of the local governments, but also speak to the NDC and the NAP. I'll show a snapshot in the next slide. And then they are assessed every year through an annual performance assessment against those performance measures. According to the methodology, we ask that at least 50% of the performance measures that will then influence the second part of that formula are related to dedicated climate indicators. The others are still relevant for climate because they might be related to the good use of the fund, the participation, but they are perhaps sometimes more cross-cutting. So we ensure that there is a minimum weight of 50% that is related to climate. And then those annual performance assessments also inform the technical and capacity building support to the local actors, local governments and communities, but also to the central government in how they are expected to accompany the system because it's theirs. So they also are supported as they progress and learn through the different phases of deployment. In terms of the menu, it's just a snapshot to illustrate that that menu might be 5-8 page long. It is aligned with the mandates of the local government, the NDC, the NAP. It is typically cross-sectoral. It is possible to craft a tighter menu if, let's say, one might wish to focus only on, let's say, agriculture, food security, water, or else. So you could have, but we think it's important to keep the cross-sectoral nature, and because the risk will need, integrated solutions, and it's important to leave the discretion to the local actors in what they think they should invest in based on the understanding of the risk and local priorities. There is also an M&E framework which we developed with the India office of the World Resource Institute and tested, and now is fully rolled out and embedded in the latest design, which is called Assessing Climate Change Adaptation Framework. It has a number of blocks that are important at the time of planning. And like I was mentioning, it is guiding the local governments to look at a range of issues, think about their local risk, think about their local priorities, but then when they select an investment with the communities, be able to articulate a small climate rationale, which also is important as it's part of the kind of, evidence base later to report to climate financiers, and it's also part of the toolbox to also reassure the climate funds, for example, that indeed the investment will go beyond the regular development investment. Now, in terms of countries, those are all the countries that are using this methodology. And of course, we discussed Kenya. We hope more will adopt the methodology because we think it's proven quite effective in a number of countries. We started in Bhutan first with the 3-6 GWs, and then gradually it's been scaled up to 100 GWs. I can explain a bit more on that with budget support from the EU, in fact. So that's what we call phase 3, when it's becoming, if not the whole country, a significant portion of the country, and clearly under the leadership of the government. By then, UNCDF is not intermediating, is not handing over the fund. And what we do is upon invitation of those partners that are bringing it to scale, and the government, of course, is to provide additional support on the side, for example, for updating the design, or helping with the oversight of the annual performance assessment, accessing additional funds. So we become more technical assistant quality assurance provider at that point. In the region, you see Cambodia has also gone quite a long way, 50 districts, and now perhaps a bit transitioning to a stronger phase 3 with access to Green Climate Fund under preparation. And we can discuss also how it might work with the and congratulations, by the way, on the newly approved CRPP program by GCF, because we see Cambodia is also on the list. They will access directly themselves. We supported the UNCDF, the entity in charge of local authorities in Cambodia, and that would be only 10 million. But we feel it's important that, of course, the countries can also get that direct access, and they can then perhaps, sequence or match it or work together with other source and perhaps the CRPP. Let us see, other countries in the region have done prior work, like Nepal and Laos. A few years ago, they've both been just redesigned to resume operation and move, we hope, to a phase 2 shortly. Tuvalu also has been working on a phase 1, will transition to phase 2 within next year. And Solomon Island is starting with the ambition to go to the 9 provinces right away. We can discuss all these countries. Others are have designed. The design is ready, or will be updated in inception in Vanuatu, Fiji, and Pakistan. Bangladesh as well has scaled up to 72 local governments already. And then there is a lot of learning you see with the other regions as well. I mentioned this, so this mediation to help access Adaptation Fund or Green Climate Fund. We have supported a couple of entities in the region with their own accreditation efforts successfully, Cambodia and Bhutan. And we do help them now with their first concept note of funding proposal to Green Climate Fund. Other countries have progressed in other regions, so there is a lot of learning there that can take place. We also working with regional entities at times, like ICIMOD for Bangladesh or for the Pacific. So another perhaps piece of information, because we thought it's an instrument that of course goes beyond any work of UNCDF and that others might wish to use, which we see coming. We work with the countries for a couple of years to develop an ISO standard. So this ISO 14093 is in a way documenting this instrument. It's not a local ISO, it's an ISO on the performance-based climate resilience grants as an instrument that the international community might wish to use. And we've also done a decent amount of work to try to inform the UNFCCC processes. It's actually presented also as a non-market approach under Article 6.8, which we also hope can help countries, get traction on and support in using their own systems for local adaptation, and which is locally led. Also, it means that the UNFCCC financial mechanism also quite familiar by now with the instrument. Just to summarize, so 38 countries now designing on implementing. About half have activated. So you see a disbalance. It's because there is an increasing demand for this instrument. And so we need to work on them one at a time in a way, and through these phases. So even the Solomon Island case, where they will go to 9 provinces, is a bit of an exception. Often, even if we have resources to go to phase 2, we work first on a small scale to test, fine tune, and then go to a higher number of local government. The initiative is about $180 million now cumulatively. Annually, it's about 25 million of delivery for all this assistance and phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 is not delivered through UNCDF, as we explained, so it's not computed in that 25 million a year. It's accelerating. It's evidenced by the delivery on our books, but also the scale up that we see in countries like Bhutan, and also the number of partners that are supporting it. You see the list here that is has increased quite a bit over the last few years. There is also a political call from countries for simplified, consistent climate finance using this approach. Of course, there is much more that countries call to, but that's one instrument that is supported at the ministerial level. Yeah, perhaps I should pause here. I have then slides on various countries. Perhaps I can rather use them as we go through the conversation, so that we have time for discussion. Thank you very much.